Welcome to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Kaya Sattva. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Mark.
Great to see you. So I'll give a little introduction. So you're a hypnosis guide specializing in QHHT, which is quantum healing hypnosis technique. And you also offer psilocybin assisted QHHT and past life regression as a community group experience. And you do a lot of this mainly in person in the Bay Area in Oakland, California.
All true.
Great. So I'll throw it over to you in a second to find out some more details. But first, I'll let people know where they can find you. In fact, what is your website? And Instagram and Facebook, it's the same, isn't it?
It is the same. BlueLotusOracles.com is my website. And on Instagram also, Blue Lotus Oracles.
Okay, fantastic. So I thought we could start by having a bit of an outline just to begin with on what your main approaches are, and then we can go a little bit deeper into how they work. But if we can start with some and who they work for, what kind of issues people bring, some case studies, etc., and your journey on how you discovered them. So that's all to come. But just to begin with, can you give us just a bit of an outline on what is QHHT, how long are the sessions, how's it organized, and why people might choose it, and then some of the other two things that you offer as well.
Sure. So, well, the foundation of my service is certainly QHHT, Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is something that I've been in service to for the past 7 years. And yes, I have a beautiful little studio here in Oakland where people can meet with me. I also offer psilocybin assisted hypnosis sessions, which really the foundation of those sessions are actually QHHT. It's just that I cannot call it QHHT because it involves something else that Dolores Cannon hadn't explored yet. Um, and then I also offer group settings as well. So with a QHHT session, I love QHHT sessions because you really can address anything and everything. Anything you want to know about, anything you are seeking guidance on, anything that you are seeking to heal within yourself and also externally in your relationships. It really can be found by tapping into your own inner wisdom, which is really what QHHT is all about. In a QHHT session, I help folks into a nice, deep meditative state, what some people call trance, what some people call hypnosis. And so it's been said, and I do believe, that all answers reside within. So in a QHHT session, people are guided to go within themselves for the answers, all the while trusting that the higher self knows them better than anyone else does, including any uh, doctor, herbalists, acupuncturists, massage therapists, who all have their beautiful gifts to offer. And yet, there's really something about going deeply within the self to find the answers. So I feel that QHHT is so comprehensive. It's known for exploring past lives, and certainly there's a lot of great insights and healing that comes about in exploring soul's memories. Um, and then, of course, the second part of the QHHT, when I say second, I mean the second main part of the QHHT session is about availing oneself as a channel, an oracle for divine wisdom to stream through, so that the insights can be spoken on and I can ask questions to engage in an honest conversation or oracular discourse, as I'd like to call it. So in a QHHT, Mark, I think you were asking about like the framework of a QHHT session.
Yeah, well, actually, as you say that, I'm curious. I often associate I don't practice QHHT myself. I'm a past life regression therapist, but often I know that within past life regression, we can, our intention is to go into past lives, and we do in pretty much every session. Although, for example, in the modalities I practice, we might go into a between lives realm. We might encounter spirit guides or have life reviews. and or tap into an inner wisdom that looks at multiple lives together. So as you're speaking, I'm wondering, like, what kind of percentage of QHHT sessions would you have that go into past lives? Is it the majority, or is it 50-50, or past lives will be a component of most sessions, but these other elements would come in? So how does it
Mhm.
tend to work out with you?
For sure. So I've never really quantified it in percentages before, but if I were to write this moment, I would say that if I were to offer 10 QHHT sessions, I would say that about 7 of them would include past life regression exploration.
Yep.
The others, either the higher self wants to show them something else, or the seeker is not really interested in exploring their past lives. They are seeking to find out something else about what's going on in their current life, for example. Or sometimes the higher self shows symbolic images. And sometimes it's not even a past life, it's a parallel life or some other dimension or somewhere deep in this planet right here. So I just never know, which is the exciting part of being a QHHT practitioner, right? It's not always a past life, it could be something else.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, we started off by saying you're a hypnosis guide specializing in QHHT, which is actually quite a nice way to put it. And so what you've said is pretty much exactly what I'd find as well. And so just for people that don't know, QHHT is often seen as a past life regression type or based technique. But within the term past life regression, the point you're making, I think, is once you put someone in a hypnotic state, they may go to a past life, they may go to parallel lives, they may go to between lives in places you don't have a body, but there is still some sort of narrative events that are happening. And so that's the kind of thing where you can go in with sort of intentions or expectations, but you can be guided to what you need to have. And so there's sort of a commonality in the experience,
That's
and
right.
finding that inner wisdom coming through as well to make sense. But and so even you mentioned it may be a past life, it may be this life. And so for me,
Mhm.
I started off as a hypnotherapist, and as a lot of hypnotherapists find past lives because they say go back to a root cause of your issue, assuming it's going to be childhood, and it turns out to be, hundreds of years before that. So actually, so do you have a hypnotherapy background, and if people do go into this life, do you then extensively get into some of the root cause narrative events and go through some of those and heal them in a way that a hypnotherapist would do? Or,
Mm.
and is there an overlap with QHHT and hypnotherapy in that way?
I feel like QHHT really does cover all or much of what you just said.
Okay.
Um, in essence, I always trust that the higher self knows exactly what to show the person. So I like to call it actually a vision quest.
Okay.
I used to call this part of a QHHT session past life regression, and yet because of what I've come across just spontaneously in sessions over the years, I've learned that it's not always a past life that the higher self wants to show. So the premise is that the higher self is the wisdom, the intelligence that's guiding the person's visions, which is why I like to call it a vision quest, because we are seeking answers, insights, and subsequent healing through receiving visions that come with their own sensations and revelations and feelings and so on. Um, and so for the folks who in their session turns out their higher self is showing them a past life, they're also guided not only from one significant scene of that life to the next and to the next and so on, but also to the very last day of that life. Because I'm sure, as you know, Mark, there's a lot that can be revealed by revisiting the last day of a life. One can take a look to see who's around them. One can look to see where they are, what happened to them, how they're feeling, what thoughts they're having in those last moments, things like this. So, for someone who's experiencing a past life regression, that area is also explored. And then also to your point of exploring between lives, right? So, the seeker will be guided to, at the end of that last exhalation from that life, return fully to the spirit side So then on the spirit side, they can have what we call a life review. So they'll review that entire life that they were just shown and then easily gather the insights and lessons that their soul learned by living that life, which is so crucial because whatever lessons those are need to be applied to the current life. So, as the person is here on the spirit side, might as well, and then they've already gathered the lessons from that life, having had that life review. They are here on the spirit side, so they might as well take a look around to see which of their guides are there to greet them and offer them messages, right? And oftentimes, these guides are loved ones who have, moved on to the spirit side. So it's sometimes like a family reunion. And this can also be very healing. And so, also to continue this between lives exploration, we can go to the moment where they're just about to incarnate into this life. Sometimes they're even shown, oh, I had all these different choices of lives to choose from, and I chose this one because fill in the blank. So there's that opportunity of exploring that moment in time to remember what the person came into this life intending to accomplish, or what they intended to heal or learn or experience, why they chose that family in that setting, things like this. So that is also another whole area of exploration.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting emphasis. So everything that you're saying is what I do in my practice as well. And so it's a nice way to think about it, which is we talk about past life regression, but what we mean by that is between lives, this life, if it comes up. But such a big part of past life regression is really past death regression. So there's a
True that.
saying, yeah. So there's a saying that much of life is really learning how to die well in the Eastern traditions, and so I agree with you completely that one of the most important things you can ever do in a regression is to take people to a last day and the moment of dying and the moments after dying, and to seeing, okay, you leave that body, you leave behind whatever pain or limiting beliefs or conditioning was attached to that time period. You can leave that behind now because people often carry those residues. So there's a healing element in that. There's just a general idea of transcending or experiencing death and therefore transcending the fear of future death. But also, you can call it a pre-life regression when you
Right.
remember, the choices that you made of I'm going to go and incarnate with that person who's a pain in the ass.
Okay. And I
But
feel like this kind of answers the question of what is the promise of everlasting life? What is the promise of everlasting life? It's to realize that life is everlasting. Death, as we've come to learn it, is really not the end. It's just like a kind of a turning of the page or sitting in another seat. I love the way that you framed this, Mark.
and then there's another question as well. Do we take this really literally in the way
Mm,
that reincarnation is there? So even as you say, there's a bit of a distinction between a vision quest. So I'm a bit curious on like what that distinction is and what do you mean by vision quest? Because there's another way, which is even past lives. Are they literally there or not? Or are they symbolic psychological messages that we observe that they create healing? And we
mm,
assume that's because past lives are real, but uh, we the evidence is difficult to gather, and and it doesn't really matter that much from as therapists as long as we're getting therapeutic resolutions, and then we get into again this dualistic idea: I dead or alive?
mm,
And
mm,
well, there's a sort of point between where you're between, and then is it true or not? You're caught in another dualistic little trap, and it's whatever my subconscious wants to present. And so that can be with whatever narrative, with whatever symbols are images are helpful. And they may be from literal past lives, they may be from a narrative that's just serves. And so, how does that relate back to Vision Quest as you're mentioning
mm.
it? And is that something that comes up? Is that sort of distinct in some way, or can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, there are lots of reasons why I like to call this part of the journey a vision quest. Um, it's certainly an ancient practice that's been practiced by many cultures all over the world throughout time. So I feel that it's kind of a distillation of how I see this process, this part of the process. Um, Now, as I've shared with you and also other people, the very first past life regression that I myself experienced was that of a life of a monk up in a monastery up in the mountains. And I believe, by reflecting on that past life later over the years, I believe it was in Tibet. Anyways, I remember, distinctly remember, as I was having these visions of the mountainside and the monastery and how I was dressed and working in the garden and being in the village, um, there was a part of my mind that was asking me this question: are you just making this up? And I'm glad I had the wherewithal to just kind of like, okay, I heard you, and yet I'm still going to check out what's being shown to me right now because I trust that there's something that I need to learn from this. So there was this part of my mind that was asking me that question: are you just making this up? And I recognize that a lot of people have that questioning within themselves. Are you just making this up? Was that a past life that I saw? And so on. So by calling it a vision quest, it kind of just eases that questioning. It doesn't, whether it's a past life that my soul actually learned or not, or maybe it was just some vision that the energy at hand is showing. Whatever you call it, what's most important is what it is teaching me or what it's taught me. And so, to your point, for therapists, the main focus is how is the information helpful to you? How is this helping you reach your goal? How is this helping you heal mentally, emotionally, physically? Those are the questions to ask. Not, for me at least, not so much, are you just making that up? And by the way, I believe that even if I made that whole thing up, that speaks to the brilliance of my intuitive imagination, which is itself a great teacher. So, however you look at it, I always encourage people to, in their visions, with their visions, take what it's showing you. And all those questions, the analytical mind can, digest if it wants. It doesn't need to.
And to that point, there's a part where you might think, "Am I making this up?" And you come up with sort of some strange little story, and then you sort of forget about it, and you go on to the next thing, and you make another strange little story, and then there's another strange little story, and then you realize, oh, all of these strange little stories that I didn't know where they're going or what they meant, they now all interweave perfectly, and I can
It always
see
does.
each one of it was like little jigsaw puzzles, and then they all fit together. I had no idea what
Yeah,
I was making on A and B and C, and then I
yeah,
realized that the story of this life is D, and it all
yeah,
fits together. And
that's right.
then, I mean, how anyone could possibly do that? So that
Yeah.
becomes like you can't prove it scientifically, but it just in terms of people realizing like there's no way I'm that smart.
And this is reminding me of something that Dolores Cannon herself said. She said something along the lines of, if you don't believe in past lives, see it as a story. So, you know,
Yeah.
story, vision quest, past life.
Well, you know what, actually, as you're saying, Vision Quest, like, I like the fact you're saying it's an ancient practice because even as I introduce you, this is Kaya, she does QHHT. QHHT was invented in 1983. And it's like, well, it's part of a practice. And past life regression was invented by Milton Erickson or hypnosis in like 1922 or 42. And it's like, well, actually, I had the same experience where I've lived in India for years, like a New Zealand born person going to live in India for no other reason than I don't know why I did, but you're just drawn to certain places. I didn't, and for a long time, I had no real spiritual interest. at all as a young man, but it was only my early 20s when I went to Egypt and felt a strange spiritual connection. And then 8 years later, another interweaving story. And one of my first past life regressions that I remembered was being in a temple in Egypt, talking to some person, discussing something like, where is this going? And I was like, oh, I'm in a past life regression, remembering giving past life regression to somebody. So, so I think I might have
Yeah.
been doing this. I might have been
Okay,
doing this for
exactly.
5,000.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that you've done this before. It's very evident to me, Mark. And sometimes I feel the same way. I think to myself, so part of my preparation is when I am awaiting someone to arrive at my studio, I say to myself something along the lines of, okay, I'm tapping into the part of me that has already done this before and is, so gifted in this, whether it's a past life or some other muse. I'm calling this remembrance into this present moment. Um, so yeah, I have a very similar experience with you, Mark. That
Yeah.
tapping into a past life where we've done this before.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I'll get to soon your spiritual journey and how you discovered these things. And so I think finding some of that connection and doing your own work rather than, I do meet people, even if you want to do past life regression, having your own regressions and exploring your own and it doesn't have, so we've talked quite a bit about as long as it has a healing effect, that's the main thing. But you don't necessarily even need to be going to heal bad things, but to reconnect with good things and skills is pretty helpful. And then eventually to transcend any idea of good versus bad, because even the bad stuff can be really helpful in developing us on a healer's path. But also, before we get to that, just the idea that this is not a new technique that someone else invented recently. It's an ongoing practice that we've been doing for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Right.
And then get psilocybin assisted journeying is also something which sort of sounds like, oh yeah, this has really been picking up steam in the last few years, or it's sort of become a new breakthrough in mental health, and it's starting to become a little bit mainstream medicines looking at it, for example. But what we can remember is this is sort of a foundation of a lot of religious texts going back 5,000 years. The rishis in India, or 8,000 years, would take certain substances and commune with, or shamans would take substances and commune with, in the Amazon and ayahuasca, or peyote, or all of these hallucinogenic substances, which would label them to, drop free of the limited perception of this life and to get an expansive version of reality. So again, a very ancient technique, which is sort of getting a rebirth, and as people are awakening to it in these recent days. So what's your experience with that? Is that something that is kind of quite new to you, or is it something which was part of your journey over the last decades that helped awaken you, or what's your
Sure.
uh,
All of
yeah.
the above, really. Well, on a personal level, I have had a handful of journeys with psilocybin mushroom in the setting of peaceful nature, rivers, trees, um, safe space, where I have had some very interesting experience of, I call it remembering more of myself. I found myself embodying an energy that felt ancient to me. I was in. I understand what people say when they say that their consciousness, their awareness is expanded. It felt like I had this broad awareness of everything and myself as part of it all. So I had some very interesting awakening experiences with this beautiful sacrament.
Yeah, whenabouts was this in your journey? Is that in the last few years, 10, 20?
Oh, well, I would say that my very first experience with psilocybin mushroom would have been maybe about uh, 20, 25 years ago,
Okay.
something like that, when I was in my mid 20s, late 20s. Um, And so that was really the breadth of my experience with psilocybin. And then fast forward many years later, it was an afternoon of 2019, I believe. 2019.
Yep.
And the best way that I can explain what happened was that I heard a voice in my mind, and somehow, some way, I knew that the voice was that of magic mushroom, psilocybin mushroom, magic mushroom. I can't explain how I knew it. I just knew it. And the voice said to me, Kaya, it's time that you and I work together. Those were the words I heard. Kaya, it's time that you and I work together. And I paused and I thought about what I just heard. And I had a response to the spirit of mushroom. And I said, wait a minute, aren't you illegal? And so I was thinking, I don't think I want to be doing anything illegal. And this was when my practice as a hypnotherapist, a QHHT hypnotherapist, was really gaining a lot of momentum. And the understanding that I gathered from that message was that I was to combine hypnosis with mushroom. So I just I thought about it. I had a bit of resistance because I was not wanting to do anything illegal. And then I spoke to some very dear loved ones, and they were warning me, no, 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 think about this and think about that. So I just kept the knowing that when the time is right, I will know it. I will absolutely know it. It will be very clear to me, and that would be the time that I move forward. So, as I was considering this, I did some research. And in my research, I found out that psilocybin had become decriminalized here in Oakland, California, only a few months prior. So then I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess the message is true. It is time. It is time for us to work together. So staying true to my trust in divine timing, I continued to trust that when the time was right, I would know it. And then just one afternoon, it became very clear. I was in the middle of doing something, and it just became very clear. Okay, now's the time. So literally, I put down whatever it was that I was doing, and I grabbed my phone, and I felt like this channeled text came out through my fingers and into my phone, and I posted something on Instagram, and the words just flowed, something along the lines of the spirit of mushroom and I are partnering together to expand greater awareness and so on. So that was the beginning of my integrating the wisdom of mushroom into the wisdom of the guided experience, not only with me as a guide, but also the higher self and spirit guides alike.
Very interesting. Yeah. So,
I've learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot.
yeah. Well, I mean, just a few observations. Some people, to have a hallucinogenic experience is, one thing, or to do it a few times at a certain time in your life. I think a lot of people do. But it's interesting to note that, it's something you experienced, but it wasn't something you were overly into.
Mm.
And,
So
yeah. And so sorry, just to have that 20-year gap is kind of interesting. And then to even have that resistance about, is it criminalized? And, you're there in the Bay Area. And so there's also the history. And so LSD in the 1960s was a sort of a breakthrough, a massive part of the 60s countercultural revolution. It was used and explored by the government with an open mind and, well-credentialed professors like Tim Leary and Ram Dass came through. But then things clamped down and things were criminalized and demonized to an extent. And so I think that's where we get this. Is it criminalized? Is it bad thing? And so we had this sort of awakening and then clamping down in the 60s. And it seems like we're going through another phase. So you've got your experience of awakening to it, experiencing it, putting it aside, not being a person who's overly concerned about drugs but more interested in the spiritual path without it. But it's just interesting that you're getting led back to it. And so, are you aware of some of the history? And have you thought about that as a collective consciousness and what society is going through in its relation to mind expanding things? And so, how do you see sort of the messages you're getting as an individual, but how do you see that playing out into us as a society?
I feel that what a lot of people are calling the rebirth of psychedelic discoveries, medicine, is actually at a really coming about in such good timing, because my sense is that so many of us can easily become very clouded in energies, belief systems that get in the way of seeing the truth, or being connected to our truth. And I feel that psychedelics have a way of kind of dissolving those veils that have gotten in the way, like clearing the cobwebs, so to speak. And so therefore allowing all these connections of wisdom to flow very easily, greater awareness. So there's a really good timing of this all. And it is my hope that as many people as possible can really benefit from this assistance. And by the way, I also want to make clear that in the psilocybin assisted sessions that I offer, hypnosis sessions that I offer, it is assisted with a very small amount of psilocybin, what would be considered a microdose. So a microdose is really not enough to induce a psychedelic experience. It's just enough to help you tap into its wisdom. And also, many people find that with a microdose of psilocybin, they're able to feel a little more grounded. They can more readily experience deepening relaxation. They can have this experience where it feels to them like their mind is just kind of quieting down a little bit. And all of this is very conducive to experiencing guided trance. So I'm finding that a microdose of psilocybin is actually very compatible with guided trance work. Now, for some folks, they would like to experience the wisdom, the guidance of mushroom on I'll just call it a higher or stronger level. So therefore, for folks who have already worked with me and who want to have that experience, I also avail myself as what people would call a sitter, a psychedelic sitter, where I can no longer call it a hypnosis session, because the energy and the wisdom of the mushroom itself really is the guiding, quite the guiding force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Interesting. What led you to choose microdoses? In fact, and to make that distinction, was that part of the message? And that's mainly so that that makes sense, because I can imagine if you're having a strong amount, then the ability to guide someone in a hypnotic state, it radically changes, and so then it becomes a different thing from sitting. Yeah.
Right. So a big part of my preparation, my personal preparation, to avail this service to others, is I myself self-microdosed. So it's an interesting thing that happened. One day, I remember I was meeting with a client, and this was during a time when I was still in this phase of deciding whether to combine psilocybin with my practice or not. And I met with someone when I was in the midst of considering this, and on his necklace was a big mushroom. And I commented on it, and later we arranged to have an exchange where he would offer some mushroom in exchange for another session. So again, back to my preparation, my personal preparation to be such a guide. I myself did a lot of research on how to properly microdose, and I microdose myself. So I gave myself a small amount and then gradually increased it. And then I came to find where this sort of threshold is, where, okay, this feels like something else. And I don't think that if I were being guided into trance, I would be able to follow their instructions so much.
Yeah.
So I had to become acquainted with mushroom in this way, in this microdose way. And then also, in the beginning, I offered psilocybin assisted hypnosis sessions to folks who knew that I was still in this exploring phase. And so those sessions were very informative to me as a practitioner to see what differences I notice with the seekers when they have had a little bit of mushroom.
Yeah. And so it comes back to like if you want to do past life regression, look at some of your past lives. And if you and it, so it sounds like how do you think mushrooms were able to speak to you because you'd had that initial experience 25 years earlier? Therefore, you'd been tuned into that in some way. And as you were doing research, did you look at other things like ayahuasca or many other sort of herb medicines that people take, and they take in various ways, and often that you because you could then go through a path of having many sessions yourself at a fairly high dosage to connect and etc. So I know in ayahuasca people will do 30, 40 sittings and then guide people through and so that's sort of a whole nother process. So is that something that you explored, and do you have some ideas and sort of comparing why you went this way, or is it only psilocybin that's spoken to you, and the other things are just you just haven't explored?
More the latter parts where I feel very called to work closer and closer with mushroom.
Yep.
And so to really keep my focus, I know that in the future I may explore other psychedelics in a therapeutic setting. So for now, I feel like there's still a lot for me to learn about working with this. Even though it's been a few years now, I'm continually learning. Um, and so I feel very comfortable, I guess, just kind of sticking close to this focus for now.
Yeah, sounds good. So, are there different indicators of certain people who would not be interested in psilocybin, and some that wouldn't be interested in QHHT but are interested if psilocybin's added? Or maybe they could do QHHT for one particular issue, but there's another issue which they sort of some assistance helps them. And so, like, how do you make the decision? How do other people make the decision on whether they have the psilocybin assisted or no?
For sure. And to your point, it's the seeker themselves who ultimately makes the decision. I can offer informed, or excuse me, I can offer information that helps them be more informed in their decision.
Yeah.
Again, the foundation of my work is QHHT. If someone would like to have a quantum healing session with the assistance of psilocybin, then there's another conversation that I would have with that person. Namely, I would want to know if they're already, if they are taking prescribed medications, because that would inform our choice to go one way or the other.
Yeah.
I would want to know about their experience with psilocybin already. If they haven't had any experience with psilocybin, I would certainly want to meet with them first in my studio, where I would offer them what I like to call a kit. And in this kit, there are 3 samples of microdose, psilocybin microdoses. So I would offer a suggested protocol that helps them become acquainted with psilocybin, on their personal time, maybe in the stretch of about a week or so. So then they can tune into how they feel, preferably take notes about how they are experiencing psilocybin, so that on the day of their session, they can decide whether they want to have this experience or not. So ultimately, it's the seeker that chooses. I also want to emphasize that I offer psilocybin assisted experiences really for folks who have a curiosity and a calling to this. I believe that everyone can have a positive hypnotic experience in a therapeutic setting without psilocybin. So therefore, psilocybin is just sort of like a, like, oh, yeah, and then a little extra.
Yeah.
Or maybe some people feel like, what, I have this way about me that I'm an overthinker,
Yeah.
or I might like to experience a deeper relaxation because it's not always easy for me to relax. So for folks like this, then I would suggest.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so we're not talking about something like ayahuasca, which is adventurous people who are risk takers and a bit sort of became known as alcoholics. And alcoholism is, a very difficult disease. It has a lot of side effects and a lot of root causes. It's a bit of a mess to try and treat. It's not something I treat as a hypnotherapist, but those folks can go down, sit in Peru, take ayahuasca, and then have a massive transformative event, and come back and that particular issue is dealt with, but at quite a cost, in terms of just getting there and taking some risk and everything. And so that's sort of one thing. And so we're not talking about that. It is, and the way you're talking about it as well sort of makes me, and I like this idea of, is someone, and I think this applies to past life regression as well. If someone feels karmically connected to it, they're drawn to some sort of Eastern cultures, they're drawn to books by Brian Weiss or Dolores Cannon, then that's something they may be drawn to exploring more. But even as we're talking about, and some people do get a bit overexcited by plant medicines or drugs or whatever in a positive or a negative way, but even in a positive way. And so it's like this substance will solve my issues for me, which is only ever going to be part of the issue. But the kind of people that might take it are people who have some of this life experience with taking substances and feel relaxed with it. But it's also part of our overall human experience to take some sort of substances, whether it's we talk about drugs and something being criminal or not, but we're all taking some sort of plant medicine, be it caffeine or and in
Yeah.
past life, yeah, and in past lives, certainly, if we've been a witch, if we've been a healer, if we're making medicine with herbs, if we're a rishi or a seer or a meditator or involved in any sort of spiritual tradition, and in many parts of the world over many thousands of years, we've been taking some sort of consciousness expanding uh, herb or substance at some point. So that's part of our past life heritage, and so it's not everything that we are. It doesn't come to define us. It can be if you're a deadhead in San Francisco following the Grateful Dead around or something. If for some people it really takes over and becomes their identity, but for overall, but then we can then separate ourselves and say, I'm not that. Drugs are criminal. It's a certain type of person that becomes their identity. But that sort of disconnects us from the implicit degree to which a small degree of that is part of our cultural heritage and our past life experience. And why not have a little bit of that reconnection in this life? And so, yeah, so that's sort of it's that sort of, so this microdosing is a way of sort of encapsulating that small part of it being part of the human experience. And it's also, as you say, I like the fact that you don't. It's you can have all of these experiences without it. And that was sort
Sure.
of one of the things that Tim Leary and Ram Dass went to India, took LSD, overdosed their teacher, and he said, "Yeah, it's not bad," but and they were looking at him thinking, "Oh no, we've accidentally given him 10 times the dose or something," and I hope he's not going to trip out. And it was in his tea, and he just drank it and said, "Well, it is not bad, but it's not as good as meditation."
Ah, see, that's so
Yeah.
true. Isn't that the
Yeah.
truth, right?
Right. And if you're a
Uh,
master meditator, absolutely. But if you're not, if you're
right.
if you're a
Yeah.
professor, a little bit of a kick to get you there is pretty
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. Maybe that's the reason why I don't, at this time in my life, I don't feel such a strong need personally to explore ayahuasca or LSD. I believe in the magnificent value of learning of yourself with those substances. But when you are accustomed to experiencing life in your own centered, aligned way, then it's not so compelling to seek, those
Absolutely.
substances, perhaps.
Yeah,
That's the way I
absolutely.
think.
Well,
Also, I'd like to add that another beautiful thing about psilocybin mushroom is that one can have psilocybin, even a large dose of psilocybin one day, and then the next day have something similar, and they really won't feel the same effects as the first day. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that one can experience what is it called again, where they don't notice anything, and so there's like that safety measure where you, no
yeah,
one
absolutely.
keeps wanting more and more because you just don't feel anything after a short time if
That
you
was
take
what
more.
that was the next point, which is there's a saying in the LSD community back in the day. I mean, I'm a fan of the 60s and those guys, and there was the saying there, once you've got the message, hang up.
Mm.
Make the phone call to get the message, but once you get it, don't just sit there taking it day after day and get addicted to it.
Yeah,
And so I also
great.
had experiences 25 years ago, and I'm in South America at the moment, meeting friends who are big into ayahuasca, but I'm not really interested in it for the reason, which is that whatever experience I've had. I'm very aware of the power of tapping into consciousness and meditation or hypnosis. And the interesting thing as well, ayahuasca is a very large dose, and it can be, something that, it goes on for hours and hours and you're up all night kind of a thing. And, a completely overwhelming experience. But
Uh-huh.
for a lot of, but there are 10, 20% of people who will have that massive dose and also experience nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
And
they just have that. This is actually reminding me of how QHHT is in a way similar to like a large psychedelic trip. When someone has a QHHT session and so much is revealed, so much comes through in one session. By the way, in a QHHT session, one is able to craft a list of, with me, up to 10 questions that they are seeking guidance to. And so, as all of these questions are answered, that gives the seeker a lot to digest. So, I do not expect them to have a return session for like months because they need to apply all that was just gained from their session into their life.
yeah,
And that's where they get to see the true benefit of having such an epic experience. They gather all this insight and alignment, and then they apply it to their daily life. um, and the integration of that is really where you get to see the true value of such an experience. And similarly with the psychedelics, when you receive a lot of downloads from a safe psychedelic experience, and then you integrate that into your life, that's the sweet spot right there.
yeah. Actually, in terms of integration and even the starting point, and so you mentioned that you had some experiences in your 20s, but it's not, I took a hallucinogenic and then I went on a journey to guide people in their things. That's part of your journey, but there are many other things that were part of it as well. So you mentioned that an event that happened spontaneously in 2002. So can you
Mhm.
tell us a little about, and is that part of, so even can you tell us a bit about your spiritual awakening process and that moment as well? You mentioned encountering a spirit council.
That's right. Okay. When I consider the beginning of my spiritual awakening, spiritual process, my mind goes to the time when I was I'm going to guess I was maybe about 26 years old, 26, 27 years old. And I met someone who, at first glance, I felt like I knew this person from a long time ago, or like in a past life. There's a stately way that she held herself that was very compelling to me. And when I got to know her, she introduced me to Zen meditation. So we would sit together in meditation. She gave me my first zabuton, my first zafu. So then not only did I meditate with her, I also meditated in my own home. And as I was deepening this process, I was experiencing great shifts within me, things that I couldn't yet logically explain. And so in desperation to find out what is happening, I went to bookstores. I'm not sure we had Google at the time, so I went to Shambhala bookstores, these spiritual occult bookstores to understand. And the best explanation I gathered was that I was having a Kundalini awakening or Kundalini experience. A few years after that, I found myself alongside the beach in Mexico, overlooking the ocean. And I was just about ready to get back onto a plane to head back home to the United States. But before I got into the car, I felt compelled to explore this house next door that was still being built. So I made my way there, and I made my way into this room that I thought maybe would be the master bedroom. And in this master bedroom, there were these glass doors that opened up to the ocean. And I went to one of these windows and I opened up the glass windows, and immediately I felt I just spontaneously began to step backwards, step backwards, step backwards, as if some energy was kind of like having me sit down for a little while. So I was like stepping backwards, and then the backs of my legs touched this platform, which probably is meant to be a platform where you would put a mattress. And then, so then I sat, and then I just laid down. And as soon as the back of my head touched the surface, off I went. I was having what later I called an outer body experience. And in this experience, this is the best way I can describe it. In this experience, I found myself in this vast, open, dark space. But it felt like I was kind of like lying down on like an examining table or something like that. And if I were to look forward, I saw this semicircle of orbs of light. And there were these beams shooting up and down from them. And it felt to me that they all had awareness and they were all looking at me. And it felt to me like they were all nodding in agreement. And I wondered to myself, what are they agreeing on? And what I'm about to say next, I say humbly as I can. What I understood them to be agreeing on was they were agreeing to, it was as if they were saying, yes, she was made with perfection in mind. And they were all agreeing, yes, she was made with perfection in mind. So, okay, what a crazy experience to have to understand this. So then I had to process this later, by the way. So then here I am feeling like I'm being returned to my body. It's as if I was falling back down to earth. And upon the descent down back to my body, I felt myself and I heard myself say exuberantly a big, enormous, soulful yes. But my mind didn't even know what I was just saying yes to in such a profound way. As just before I returned to my body, it became clear to me what I just said yes to. It was as if they had me promise this. It was as if they said to me, do you promise to approach everyone you meet with love? And this is what I said yes to. When I returned to my body, tears were pouring out of my eyes because I knew that I was not the same. I felt like I remembered who I am. And it became it was very clear to me what I'm meant to be doing here. I'm meant to approach everyone I meet with love. So this I carry with me, and I carry to this day as I meet people who want to have a journey, a guided trance journey. I approach them with love. I avail myself to their experience. I'm essentially, I get front row seats to people's journey. And whatever comes up for them, I feel is mutually beneficial for me too, because not only is it meant for them, I can find ways to apply that wisdom into my life. So therefore, I feel like I really am in the perfect place to be.
So,
So
so
this is why I feel that my service as a quantum hypnosis guide is very much aligned with my soul purpose.
yeah, so I think you said that awakening led you to claim a resonant name for
Ah,
yourself.
yes, yes, yes,
So
yes.
you literally you changed your name, and that's how you came upon your name? And can you tell us a bit about what that means? So,
Sure.
in
it's
fact,
it's a
are
funny
you aware?
story,
Yeah.
actually. Those who know me know the bigger story, but for this purpose, I'll share with you what I can. I can start by saying that when I was a child, I didn't feel like the name people were calling me was really my name. That's the best way I can describe it. Fast forward in my late 20s, I was given an opportunity to perform on stage, and I needed a stage name. And so I came up with Kaya because uh, I had this idea one day to go to some other city and go by this pseudonym and have this whole other alternate life, when I'm meeting people. And Kaya was the name that came to me. So then I chose this name, and I remember being introduced as Kaya for the first time. And when someone said the name Kaya back to me, I felt like this is my name. Finally, I'm being called by my true name, Kaya. It turns out, by the way, that in Tagalog, which is a Filipino language, Kaya means capable. So my dad likes to tease me a little bit by calling me Kaya and Kaya, which means you are capable of anything, really. Um, Sattva came to me when I chose to fully claim the name Kaya and claim it legally as well. So I needed to have a name that went with Kaya. And I came up with Sattva because I remember, Mark, the person who I told you about, who taught me about Zen meditation?
Yep.
She once told me that I remind her of a bodhisattva. And I didn't know what bodhisattva meant at that time. But then when I did my research, it made sense to me. It felt resonant to me. So sattva comes from the word bodhisattva. And when I did my research later, after changing my name to Kaya Sattva, I came to learn that one of the meanings of sattva is pure or perfection. And so this circles back to the message I got, which was she was made with perfection in mind. So there's, as people who have changed their names know, claiming a name that feels resonant is very powerful, very, very powerful. Yeah, suffice
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah. And that's great. And so sattva on its own, purity, serenity, being drawn towards dharma and wisdom, but as well, and particularly in the Mahayana, the Zen Buddhist tradition of Japan, they have within that culture the bodhisattva vow. So that's a commitment to free others from suffering and lead them to enlightenment. And
This is the Bodhisattva vow that you just mentioned, Mark, is what I felt me saying yes to. I felt that I was renewing my vow
yeah,
to approach everyone with love, therefore uplifting humanity.
yeah. And so for me, the bodhisattva vows to attain enlightenment, but not until they can help lead all others to enlightenment as well. So for me, perfection is purity, is a cleansing towards the perfection of enlightenment, and the intention to make all others enlightened with you. And so that's another way of thinking about the perfection of mind is perfection, the perfection of the enlightened mind. So it's, I mean, it's a wonderful name.
Thank you. Um, you're reminding me actually right now of when you mentioned that we attain, as bodhisattvas, we attain enlightenment after helping others with theirs. I'm thinking about how the enlightened us already exists. It's like our future ascended master versions of ourselves that already exist. And so, if at this time of life we can go into a past life, why not a future life come into this life to assist us with what we most need at this time, knowing what it knows already?
Yeah. And an energy that exists between lives, or also, but that transcends the idea of time in which actions are taken, which is karma, which then needs to be balanced. But absolutely. So that part where those wise ones were looking at you is probably a timeless dimension, absolutely, where that ultimate wisdom exists now. It's not something that's going to happen in future after some work, then we can be happy. But absolutely, to tap into it in this moment, very moment, is what it's about. And then we bring that back into ourselves and those that are still struggling with the concept of time. But absolutely, the timeless wisdom is there
We are speaking
now.
the same language, Mark. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, well, yeah. So what's interesting, just the Buddhist background as well. I think it's useful for practitioners to study the world religious traditions, and and to be experienced in the world's what anything that expands consciousness. And so that's great. And so actually to that, and so that's always a good background. And then we tend to focus that into tools and techniques that we can use as practical practitioners. And so it is for some people to be at the Zen center or to be, in the monastery or whatever it is. And maybe that was for us in past lives and future lives. But as it is now, we're working with particular sets of tools and techniques and approaches that we work with people in uh, a secular life, essentially. We're not in a sequestered away in a monastery. And so for you, part of what that meant is, 10 years after that experience you're describing, you're then led to Dolores Cannon and found her books in 2012, Alba Wyman in 2014, and hypnotherapies. And so it's worth noting then that you talk about this, you have these, transcendent experiences, but it takes many years to integrate them all and bring them to a point where you can then create that as an offering. And so it was in 2017, I believe, that you launched your practice as a full-time professional. Is that right?
Well, 2017 was when I began training in QHHT.
Okay.
So technically, if I were to look at my professional practice, I would say more 2018 because January of 2018 is when I became certified. And when I became certified, by then I had already given, I think, 25 sessions or so. So it's kind of like there's this margin there, but
Yeah.
2018, I would say.
Yeah. And so you mentioned since then you've given 7,000 session hours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it's good. So
Uh,
it works out to be quite a lot in that time. And so,
it's
so
a
I'm sort of,
lot.
yeah, I'm curious. Some of the people that are watching, a lot of people get certified, not a lot of people go on to do thousands of sessions. And so I
Right.
know that there are parts where you go in and you have some good experiences on your training, and then you're out in the world and you have ups and downs at various stages in your healer's path. So for the
Right.
people that are like, well, how do I get to 7,000 hours? I've had a few hiccups here and at certain stages. What are some
Sure.
of the things you can share about, that can help other people or they can relate to, or how does, or
Abs-
how's that journey
yeah,
been?
absolutely. So, to help answer this question, I have got to start with the story of my very first session when I was still in training, and I gave my very first internship training. This session was with a very, very dear friend of mine. I love her to pieces. She's very trusting of me. And so, because of her open mindedness as well, it was a very um, positive experience for her. Um, when she came out of her trance and emerged and she opened her eyes, these were the words that she said to me. She said, Kaya, I can see how you're going to help a lot of people with this. When I heard those words, I knew right then and there that this is what I wanted to focus my energy and attention on. Because on a soul level, I knew that by serving in this way, I would be in the prime position to fully live my life purpose, which we spoke about earlier today. At the time, I was a jeweler. I was a goldsmith jewelry designer. And when she said those words to me, immediately I had the vision of all of my jewelry tools getting all dusty and rusted up because I would be focusing my entire attention to this. Now, a QHHT session, the session itself goes anywhere between a proper QHHT session, I would say, goes anywhere between 5 to 6 hours. Now, that seems like a lot of time, and it is. However, time goes by like this when you're kind of in this zone. So it might only feel like maybe 2 hours went by when, in fact, 5, 6 hours went by. So I can only really give one session a day. Now, before a session even begins, I spend 30 to 60 minutes in a phone conversation with a person. So the process begins even before the seeker and I meet. Also, I consider a session complete only after the person has listened to their recording, their audio recording of their hypnosis, the hypnosis segment of their session. So after someone has listened to their recording in its entirety, I invite them to sit with what has come up with them, reach out to me, and let me know when they are available for a follow-up conversation where we can talk more about what's coming through for them, what dots they're connecting, and so on. So a comprehensive, full-on QHHT session can take like 7, 8 hours. So therefore, and because I've been focusing on this practice, it gains momentum, right? Whatever you focus your energy on, it grows. And so more and more people would find out about me, and more people are finding out about QHHT. And I seem to be one of only a few practitioners here in Oakland that offers QHHT. So my practice just grew and is still growing. And so in the past 7 years, I've been able to hold space for many hours for many people.
Yeah. And so can you give us some examples of the kind of reasons that people seek out a session? Like, do they have presenting issues? So you mentioned there are 10 questions that they craft. And so do they go in with uh, therapeutic issues? emotional, spiritual, physical? Are they facing illness or disease? You know, diagnoses of certain things, life changes, divorce. What are some of the things that inspire people to have sessions and then
I,
specifically work on?
mm. I think about the questions that people come to their sessions with. And one of the main questions and frequently asked questions um, is, what is my purpose? Am I on the right track? What gifts of mine must I be? So it's purpose related. They feel like they're on track, but they maybe want some confirmation, or they feel off track and they want to know how to get on track, how to experience greater passion, greater energy, greater fulfillment, joy in their life. Also, a great number of folks come into their session because there's something that needs healing within themselves, whether it's physical, emotional, maybe even mental. So there's the therapeutic aspect of a QHHT session. Sometimes it's curiosity, or sometimes it's because they're having an unexplained experience with what they feel is an extraterrestrial. And they want to know what is going on. Why am I being visited? Or they feel like, I don't like being here anymore. I probably never even wanted to be here. Why am I here? What do I need to be doing here on earth that I need to fulfill so I can go back home? So lots and lots of areas of exploration in a QHHT session. I learned a lot.
Okay. So can you give us an example? I noticed there's somebody recently on your Instagram, and they had a QHHT session with you. They were then inspired to go on and write a book in which you become like a character and accredited with being part of an inspiration for that. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or any other case
Ah.
studies that come to mind?
I know of a lot of folks who, in their session, come to find out that they are really meant to be writing books. Their higher self is like, you've got to write, or their loved ones in spirit are like, finish that book. This particular person that you're speaking about, I can only be honest by saying I don't remember the details of her session, but from her description, she encountered a blue-colored extraterrestrial, and it was quite a profound experience for her. And somehow, some way, she has integrated that experience into the book that she recently published, which she describes as a channel text. Um, so a QHHT session can really help one remember what it's like to experiencing channeled inspiration. And it comes through in many forms, whether in a leadership role, or as an author, or as a performer, or as an artist, or as a parent. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's that's part of, so there's a therapeutic element, but there is also, as we've been mentioning, reconnecting with abilities. And I think oftentimes we are blocked in some ways from finishing that book or feeling that, it's worthwhile to put this down in writing or whatever it is, to allow whatever it is that wants to flow from your subconscious out into your behaviors and actions. So this person wrote a spiritual fantasy novel called The Realm of Unity,
Yes.
inspired by, and so then you also mentioned the session isn't over until someone re-listens to their audio, which again, it speaks to the fact if you're doing a lot of sessions. I remember my first 2 or 3 years thinking all of these sessions are so intensely memorable, I will never forget a session. And yeah, and with you laugh because then about a few more years in, people say, "Oh, I loved our 3 sessions together. What's your name? Have we met?"
Right.
But
You know,
because also like their eyes are closed, they're speaking. My eyes will be closed as well. I'm in hypnosis kind of as well, guiding it, and it's all
right.
deep. But just to, like once you get into the thousands, you're
Yeah.
going to be forgetting a lot of people.
Oh my God, you bring up a lot of things that I can totally relate to, such as when the person is in trance, they're not the only one experiencing trance. We ourselves, as guides, slip into a state of trance as well. And speaking of remembering sessions, the way that I'm able to remember sessions is that something will come up during the day and it'll remind me of something that I saw in someone's journey. So that's how I'm able to kind of pull from the records um, what's
Oh
stored in my
yeah,
subconscious, perhaps.
absolutely, absolutely. Once jogged, you can because the trick becomes as well that if you sort of meet them as well, just walking around, like I spent hours with your subconscious self. This conscious self, hi, how you doing? Where you're going? This day-to-day conscious mind stuff. I don't really haven't met that person as much,
Uh,
and then it's just remembering like the initial interview. That's where I met that
uh,
person. Other than that, it's their subconscious self I was communicating with most of the time. This
mm,
conscious person is a little different.
mm,
But once they sort of tell you, oh, there's this and that, then it's like, okay, got it. So,
uh-huh.
but yeah, absolutely. Initially, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Yeah. This is why it's for me. It's important to keep written notes
yeah,
because when someone reaches out like a year or two later for another session, I'm
yeah,
able to look at my written notes and kind of like help my memory so that we can continue building on what was already started.
yeah,
But the audio recordings, I can only really keep. Well, I choose to only keep about a year's worth of current recordings. I give the recordings to the seeker so I know that it's where it needs to be.
yeah.
Personally, I only keep so much.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with me. The notebooks that I take notes that are memory, they're not notes of what happened in the session. They're memory joggers that mean I can remember it, not that I've described it. And but what I've found in recent years is I'm now able to zoom everything. I can then extract an audio file, get AI to translate it or transliterate it, and then I've got, massive documents. Again, quite hard to read through, but it's there, and that does mean if you want to write case studies up, it's a lot easier because
Yeah,
so yeah, so that's
yeah,
great. And so yeah, and so we actually do
cool.
have some observations in terms of like what it takes to be a successful practitioner to get to those thousands of hours. Because there are
Mm-hmm.
certain points I teach people, and I see the healer's journey. A lot of people, we know that a lot of people are healers in some degree, but there's one. The next level is becoming a professional, um, and then dealing then with the overwhelm of just thousands of people and the many hours that we put into it. And so there's the passion and connection that gets us there. But then there can be little points that healers need to manage their own energy. We can tend to look after others more than ourselves. And then that can take us out of the work if we burn out a little bit. Or in earlier times, we may start doubting ourselves, might start questioning our abilities or outcomes or what's happening. And then a limiting belief can sleep in. And then people go out of the profession too early when they're a few hundred hours in, not thousands. And so, what are the things for you that you've noticed that have enabled you to ride it out and to show up and be present and on point? When people are ready, when it's time. And what are some of the any difficulties that you managed to overcome?
Mm. Wow, these are great questions, Mark. So I would say that first and foremost would be what I had described earlier, which is I feel that this is a calling for me. And I feel that by doing this, I am aligned with what I'm meant to be doing. So for a lot of people, they feel the same way, like it's a calling. They feel really drawn to this for some seemingly inexplicable reason. Also, I'd like to add that every session gives me as a practitioner an opportunity to look at what went really well, look at what I could do differently. And so while we have the foundation of trainings, workshops, reading books, and so on, it's really in the giving sessions continually that you're able to reflect and refine your practice. And this is what I've been learning over the years. So every session gives me this opportunity to reflect. And so when things don't go well, when I say well, I don't really mean badly. What I mean is things don't go as I or the seeker had hoped. Even so, I see that as an opportunity to learn, because it gives me and the person an opportunity to see, like, what area of the session can we go a little further, or what area can we drop a little deeper, or what self-limiting beliefs just came up that can now be reassessed. So even in a session that doesn't go quite as hoped or planned, gives an opportunity to go further or deeper, and to as a practitioner learn how to adjust to what's needed by each person. So it takes a lot of flexibility. Also, it takes a dedication to continually learn, not only from what you're experiencing, but receive multiple trainings, mentorship, also meditation. A good practice as a guide is having a dedicated meditation practice. It's a favorite practice of mine to sit in meditation in the morning before I meet with the client. And I imagine that my guides are in cahoots with the guides of the person I'm about to meet. And I'm asking questions like, what is needed of me today? So there's that, tapping into our spiritual resources. So I would say that dedication to the service that you're continually refining is key. And also, when things get to a point where you find yourself questioning, with that, and speak to a caring friend or a confidant to get another perspective, to have someone reflect back to you what they see in you that maybe you lost sight of. So there are many, many ways that we can continue forward with the path as a healer, while all the while continually receiving guidance and support by others. So I would say that. And also, as I had posted recently, I actually just came back from a sabbatical, a month-long sabbatical. And I decided to take this month-long sabbatical in October, November. And there were a lot of things, a lot of events converging, personally, professionally, nationally, globally, that had me see that then would be the perfect time to just kind of get back to myself and continue reading the books that I wanted to finish reading, or complete the online trainings that I had started, or just reflect, reset, realign. And so tending to oneself is absolutely crucial. It is also a favorite practice of mine to go on walks on a daily basis, especially helpful after a session. So after a session, I like to take my 2 dogs to a couple of nearby parks. And in these parks, there are beautiful trees everywhere. So I like to reground myself as I'm reflecting on what just came through for the seeker. How might I apply those insights into my life? What went well in that session? What can I do differently? So as I'm regrounding myself out in nature, I'm integrating and in a way, train myself to become a better practitioner.
Yeah, that's great. I prepared for this call this morning by lunchtime by going through a walk through Buenos Aires, through a couple of parks, one botanical garden, exploring
Nice,
the city, but through the parks. And I think
nice.
everything you're saying there I resonate with completely. I did it myself just before we started. And I love this idea of looking at sessions and reviewing and reflecting, refining. And absolutely right. There's a structure we have, but there's a flexibility and how we implement it. And it's a massive opportunity. So even the mentoring you mentioned, the mentoring that I give people is really focused on having them give collections of in total 36 sessions to people in the full program that I give, and reflecting and on three of them per at a time, full sessions that they give in 12 calls that I have, so that we can exactly. And to me, the unexamined life isn't is worth living. The unexamined session is a missed session. And if to really reflect on and review the sessions that you've done at a really deep level, just greatly amplifies the learning you get out of it and the development that you can make. So that's a great practice. So that's part of Kaya's secret to how to get to this point that not many people don't get to being uh, busy and occupied year after year. And I think the other learning that I come back to is it's a calling and a purpose. And you say the sabbatical brings you back to yourself, but that's the self that you've discovered. As you've gone through this podcast, you told us about the journey to get there, the journey to discover a version of your true self, and you've taken years to integrate that in. So there's a degree of healing or spiritual development, spiritual practice, Zen Buddhism, and meditation, all these things that you've done. So that's another great message for healers, which is it's one thing to learn a certain technique, but there's the practice and growth and development and taking that long term perspective does take these years. And so when you go back to that
True.
self and remembering that, so, and that helps you realize that yourself is a sattva, you know, and
Right. Someone can receive level one, level two distinction as a QHHT practitioner. And two level two QHHT practitioners could have widely varying degrees of experience. And if I were seeking a QHHT practitioner to help guide me, of course, I'm going to favor the person who has more experience. So this is why I just want to reemphasize the value of just continue as a practitioner, continue like just, you're going to learn more and more and more and more as you learn how to hold space for a wide variety of different seekers. And they're all going to teach you something special. I also remember early on in my experience as a practitioner, guiding folks who would come into all these insights that I actually really needed to hear for myself.
yeah.
So there's that benefit to tending to yourself as a practitioner by integrating what just came through in the sessions that you just gave.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. That I noticed that as a common thing that happens with people as they in the first few years of the spiritual path. So you certainly don't need to be fully healed and integrated to start healing,
That's
but
right.
but it's actually by helping healing other people that can become the next step to your own healing. So
That's right.
like to
Some
really
people
deepen
feel
it.
like, oh, I can't be a healer because I've got to heal myself first. And there is value to that. And to your point, we
Yeah,
heal each other as we support one another.
yeah, fantastic. Okay, and is there anything else you'd like to say in closing? That's been
You know, in preparation for our meeting today, Mark, I imagine that you and I are sitting, enjoying a cup of tea, just casual conversation, cup of tea. And I'm glad that I gave myself that understanding because I'm really enjoying this sense of familiarity with you that comes in having casual tea together. So I just really want to thank you, Mark, for all that you do to help me and so many others really refine their calling as a hypnosis practitioner. So thank you so much also for taking the time to have this open, honest conversation with me as well. I
Yeah,
hope this helps a lot of people.
yeah, me too. I'm sure it will. Yeah, it's inspiring to see you, to hear you, the things you say, and just to feel your energy as you say them is quite a blessing. So thank you very much for agreeing and sharing and coming on the podcast.
It is a pleasure.